In this video, we are going to be designing a RESTful API. Hi everyone, Yvonne here with another episode of DevWidgets, and this is the first in a series of videos, mini-series, I should say, that builds out a fully featured serverless application on AWS. First things first, what is a REST API? So the simplest way to describe a REST API is it's a way for users and clients to communicate with an application over HTTP. Think websites, think mobile applications and how they communicate to their backend. They use a HTTP API call that will either send information or get information from a backend server. Typically, that communication is JSON structure, but honestly, it can be XML, it could be HTML, it could be plain text, it could be PHP, yada, 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 yada. The list goes on. Another thing that a REST API has is that it should be stateless. So when I call one API, the server shouldn't save something that I called that API, and then when I call a subsequent API, that response changes because I called that other API. So think pagination, right? If I call an API that returns a list of items and they only give me a subset of that items, the next time I call that API, it's still gonna give me that same subset, unless I send a parameter that says starting at index 21, give me the next 20 items. The next thing that an API should be is that it should be able to support caching, right? If I say give me item 1, 2, 3, and I call it multiple times, that first time, yes, it will go to the server, it will go to your database, it will get that item 1, 2, 3, right? But the second time I call them, chances are item 1, 2, 3 has not changed within a 5, 10, 20, 30 minute window, right? And instead it should be able to go to a cache and get that cache JSON response and then return that to me without going to the backend, without going to the database. So for our project, what is our business use case that we're trying to design an API for? Basically, it's a REST API that returns a list of upcoming events. So you could think of this as a mobile application that says, okay, return me the list of events that I signed up for. Or you can think of a website that might be publishing, okay, these are the events that we have in the month of July. So what we're going to do now is we're going to basically draw out what that API might look like. All right, so here we have a blank sheet of paper. Let's talk about what those paths might look like, right? So when you name your API, you want to think of concise, clean URLs, right? We don't want to have a URL that's like events that I signed up for, right? We actually want to break that apart and make that a nice hierarchy, a nice clean structure. And we want our names to be short and sweet. So in this case, we can just name it events, right? So you can imagine that you have an API that says events, and plural because we have more than one events in our store, right? So the other thing that's important here is that we want to put versioning, and versioning is important in case I need to change that contract with my front-end clients. They can't change at the precise exact moment that I change my code. So instead, I create a V2 with those enhancements, and that gives our clients, our mobile applications, our websites, etc., to go and make changes and then use our new versioned API. And so when we call events, this is going to return to us a list. So that comes back in a bracket. And inside of that, there'll be curly braces of your objects. And think it would have like ID, for example, 1, 2, 3. Another one is event 1, 2, 3. So that would be something like V1 and then slash the ID 1, 2, 3, right? And that would return our curly braces. It would be ID colon 1, 2, 3. And then we can get even more fancier searching, right? So we could have slash events slash V1 slash search. And then you can imagine parameters like where the date is greater than let's see, 2021, I'm running out of space, but let's say that says 0701, quotes, and so on. And so this will return a list, for example. That list could have none, or it could have many objects, and so on and so forth. Okay, right now we've been cutting corners and we just have ID or whatever, but let's actually look at what our actual event structure could look like. So again, an object starts with a curly brace. Like we mentioned before, we definitely need an ID. So 1, 2, 3, and comma. So JSON structure is key value pairs. The key is always in quotes. The value depends, right? It could be a number, it could be a Boolean value, so true, false. It could be a list, or it could be an object, or it could be a string. And we'll do some examples of those now. So for example, we can have name. So name is this, and we can just have a string like, what's the name of the event? Weird animal facts. Like, for example, did you know that horses cannot breathe through their mouth? Didn't know that. Learned that this week. So we had a comma here. Let's do an object. So why are objects important? So you can imagine, let's say, for example, date, right? Or maybe the date and time information has duration, and that's something that you think the attributes, a part of that date and time object, could change over time. You want to create that in an object so that you don't break the contract you have with your clients, right? You can't go and then change what the value of something might be. So maybe in the beginning you had date time was a string, for example, and then you realize you need to add duration to that. So then you could think ahead and say, actually, no, let's make this an object. And we could say that object has time, it has zone, it has duration, so on and so forth. And then you can imagine this list growing over time without breaking the contract that you have with your front ends. So let's close that object. What's a good list one? So locations, right? We're gonna name, for example, locations, and we put an S there to signify to our clients, our end users, that this is going to return a list. And so we have our open bracket and then curly braces, and then we can have, let's say, type. And so type could be online. One thing you want is that you use enums. You don't use the actual label that the client might show, because the client might actually choose to say an online event, put virtual experience, or it might say an online event is, just that, an online meeting or something like that. So we send enums from the backend so that the UI, the presentation layer, can choose how to display that information. And then you can imagine it has other attributes like URL, so on and so forth, right? And again, a list can have multiple items, and then you close it with a bracket. Boolean object could be, for example, active. So is this event still active, or was it canceled? And we can have right here, true. This is roughly our structure, right? We have our path, kind of what that might look like, and our JSON object, our contract that we will have for our front end. If this is a little hard to read, I'm definitely going to add a link to my blog and add it to the descriptions. As always, please share, like, subscribe, let people know if you think this was helpful for you. If you need to reach out to me, definitely reach out. I'm on Twitter. If you have some time and you have a couple hours and you want to do the fully featured series of this microservice, you can click on the link here. If not, you just have short little bursts of 5-10 minute times. Those series of videos, as they come available, will be linked here. And happy coding.